Welcome to NFL Daily, where we don't have any void years. We don't even have any void days. It's like Valentine's Day, middle of February, pre-combine, and we're cranking out these off-season previews. I'm Gregg Rosenthal here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio for the first time in weeks with my friend, Patrick Claybon.
Weeks, honestly?
Well, 2.
It feels like, because you guys are traveling the globe, cranking out podcasts, confetti going down, shuffling through parking lots and parking decks to provide the people with content. And so I've just been waiting for a chance to get back. And we're here to celebrate not just, one momentous occasion, but Gregg's new glasses.
Oh, yes.
As well.
This is a big day. I decided to wear my glasses into the studio. And, I like them. Although they make me look like my brother. Which, isn't a bad thing.
I got some news for you, Greg.
Yeah, I know, but that's my wife's take on it, but I like them, so people can let me know in the comments, but only if they're nice. Only if they're nice comments. Otherwise, I don't want to hear about them. Although we would love you to subscribe on YouTube.
Please do so.
And it's great. We're doing these off-season previews this week. We're doing the NFC South today. I mentioned the void years, Patrick, because there was some news about Chris Godwin and his void year, and we're gonna get to that actually in the middle of the show.
Oh,
we're gonna start
with deep tease.
Yeah, we're gonna start with the off-season preview, unless you want to give the listeners an update. It really only has been 2 weeks. By the way, we taped a Tuesday show during Super Bowl week. Since I've seen you, so it hasn't been that long. Now you've had a lot of dental work done in the meantime, but otherwise, you seem fresh and ready to go.
I mean, more ahead than behind me, as is the case with dental work. There's actually dental people upstairs trying to sell some wares today, and I walked up. I was like, "Is this free?" She was like, "Well," and I'm like, "No, you don't have to keep talking." But just aside from all that, just to be in a podcast studio to celebrate Gregg Rosenthal's birthday.
Oh wow!
Which is something that we are all ready to do today.
This is I'm sure everyone was prepared for that, and
I'm glad I had it ready to go. We did not plan that at all, and he mentioned a momentous occasion, and I heard through the grapevine that it might be your birthday, so I had it ready to go.
Well, nothing I would rather do on my birthday than break down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers salary cap situation. I'm telling you, it's looking good. All right, let's do it. We've been doing 10 minutes per team. Okay. We wouldn't need all the 10 minutes. Some of these teams are pretty straightforward, but we might. And let's start on the clock. I will start with the Buccaneers.
Let's do it.
And I'm going to ask a question. We'll each ask a question for 2 of these teams. I'll kick us off. Are the Buccaneers sneakily one of the best franchises in the NFL? And does their positioning this offseason help to prove it? That is my question, which is a very leading question.
I think a lot of people's feelings about the Buccaneers tend to hinge around the NFC South. I know there was the Tom Brady experience that Stafford and Cooper Kupp came down and stabbed a big hole into and caused a kind of disruption of what ultimately could have been in that postseason on their way to a Super Bowl. But I think the answer is yes, Greg.
I think so too.
It's hard to look past what we'll get what Jason Light has been able to construct, and to have this consistency with multiple quarterbacks, with multiple coaching staffs, and now having to replace yet another offensive coordinator who leaves to take a coaching job. That doesn't happen if you're not one of the better franchises in a position to put folks in that position.
And I know they lost the Commanders, and they very likely would have lost to the Eagles, but they always are a matchup problem for the Eagles. And they kind of, looking back at their last season, remind me a little bit of the Rams the last couple of years. They weren't one of the best teams in the NFL, but if you had replayed those playoffs a handful of times, I don't know. You could convince me that Baker Mayfield ends up with the Super Bowl MVP at the end of 1 out of any 10 of those seasons. And here's my case for why they're good. This exercise of being able to go through all the salary caps, all the situations that are going on this offseason, and I realize the Bucs are in one of the best positions. First of all, they're 10th in actually, they're not great in terms of cap space. They're only 1 under the cap right now. That's the 10th fewest, although they can make some moves to give them more space. But they do have all their picks. And then I look at the players that are most likely to leave this roster. There's almost no one hugely significant. Levante David and Chris Godwin are both free agents. who I think are more likely to stay with the team than go. They've got all their roster is intact. It's a lot of young players. They sign their guys early. They remind me a little bit of the Eagles, which they're built very well on both lines, and they don't have a lot of like major holes. When I look through the rosters, I could find some, certainly they could use some edge rushing, I would say would be up there. But when I look at this roster overall, I'm like, this is a roster that's in position to push a little bit this offseason to improve the team. They usually don't get dramatic, and they just don't have a ton of huge issues. So when I look at the rest of the NFC South, like going into the offseason, to me, they are the team that's in the best position, and they remain the favorites, winning it year after year.
Year after year in a different division with a different setup, where I looked at 2024, which was leading into my 2025 question with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, perhaps looking back on a season where Godwin and Evans missed that extended time. They had great moments and they had an opportunity. Was that the best year in terms of opportunity-wise for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that they're going to have here in the next 2-3 years? Because it's difficult to have the sustained success that they have had. But I'm looking at an older Mike Evans. I know how they're going to go through this period with Chris Godwin, with Levante David, with Shaq Barrett. There's only so long you can do this, and maybe we've been convinced by looking at this Chiefs core. Oh yeah, you bring guys back. You play 19, 20 games a year because you're going on deep playoff runs, and then everybody comes back, and you just run it back. But having that sustained success comes at a football cost, and the Bucs have really been paying it. And
okay,
I feel like maybe last year was the magic opportunity, and it's tough to see it going up.
I think if they have a great offseason, they got a chance here, certainly. Baker Mayfield, you lose your offensive coordinator in Liam Cohen. That could be a problem, but he obviously did great with it last year. They promoted from within. They found another wide receiver in Jalen McMillan, and part of the reason why I like it is like this roster is mostly intact. We might as well talk Godwin. We don't need to save it for the news.
Okay.
There was a report that they have extended the negotiating period with which they can bring Chris Godwin back before the void in his contract happens. And it really sounds like there's mutual interest in making a deal happen. And this organization has done such a good job with this over the years, whether it's with Levante David or Mike Evans or even younger guys like Vita Vea. They usually keep the guys they want. Makes me think Chris Godwin is never even going to make it to the market. He's in my top 12 free agents. He's coming off a dislocated ankle, but he's still young enough that you want to bet on that talent. But they have Jalen McMillan, and then I look at the rest of the roster, like the whole offense is coming back, except for left guard Ben Bredesen, who is their worst starting offensive lineman. So they have a good offensive line, and then on the defensive side, it's all just, you mentioned Shaq Barrett. A lot of their depth are free agents. Like their backups are all free agents. So it's filling in depth. You need some defensive linemen. You'll probably re-sign some of your young, good players because that's what smart teams do. Luke Gedeke, K-Dot, and Zion McCollum, all those guys could be up for contracts. And I just think they just keep cranking along while no one's looking because those two lines are so good, offensive and defensive line.
And we've seen, it's the conversation that we had about Howie before the Super Bowl, right? In paying guys when you have an opportunity to, so you can keep sustaining that success, and that's something that the Bucs have been able to do. I think a lot of the questions are going to be Baker centric, but fewer people are doubting the long term viability of Baker Mayfield now. At this point, two OCs in, right?
I know. I don't love Baker still. He's not a top. He's
Baker
not on,
doubt creeps back in.
Wait, did he make Quarterback Island in the end? I think he might have.
He tried.
Can't even remember. He had a great year. Losing Cohen is a little concerning, but if you have a great offense, like what they've done is kind of what Philadelphia has done in a stronger way, but still with Hurts, which is they have Bucky Irving. They just keep hitting on these picks. I mentioned the guys who they could extend. Like people don't think of Gedeke and Zion McCollum as stars, but those are guys they drafted in the second, third, fourth round, and they're all like plus starters. And Jason Light's really been good at adding to this roster. And oh, by the way, you have a guy, Tristan Wirfs, who's putting together a Hall of Fame resume right now.
That's the key part. It's like, well, how can everybody duplicate that? There's not a lot of Tristan Wirfs on the planet. But if you can evaluate that player, it's still something that they did, right? Other teams had a chance at Tristan Wirfs. I think it was, he was the first big acquisition after Tom Brady comes back, and so he's kind of an afterthought. But maybe history looks back on that and says, yeah, that was a big part of what allows them to be able to do the things that they have done.
So I know they don't have a ton of cap space coming into it, and if I have a feeling this might be the year Levante David retires. He didn't play as well last year. You finally saw some decline. He has said publicly previously that he will only play for the Bucs, that he either is going to retire or they'll just figure out a way to keep bringing him back. So you do wonder, like, is this an offseason where you push a little bit? You've been so close year after year. They've been patient. They've been good at drafting. They do have their picks. They're not going to give up any picks. But maybe you try to make a splash on defense. They do lack a little bit of juice in terms of top tier edge rushing talent. If Levante David is gone, that's been a franchise cornerstone. You have some good players in the secondary. I don't know if you feel like you have premier players outside of Antoine Winfield, who's obviously good, but at cornerback, like maybe they make a little bit of a push in free agency or as in the trade market.
It's
happen.
I thought it was a decent year for Yaya Diaby. All right, especially late towards the end of the season. You wonder, because Carlton Davis was that big departure, and there was success in spots until the injury in Detroit, where you think about what we were talking about with Jason Licht. It's like, well, how did Carlton Davis wind up getting out of there? And so I feel like there's still kind of a need there that's tough to address in the draft, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to see if the Packers don't necessarily want Jair Alexander anymore. There could be some good players at corner that could be available if the Bucs do want to make a run.
I keep mentioning there's pretty good cornerback class. Asante Samuel Jr. is a guy I could just see on the Bucs for some reason. It's one of the better free agent positions out there, and I think they could be looking there. All right, let's go on to your Panthers. I'm calling them your Panthers because of the presence of Bryce Young. Put 10 minutes on the clock, and give me a question you have about this Panthers team.
Coming into 2024, the question was, how do you protect Bryce Young? And they go and address that in the middle of the offensive line. And looking at the year-over-year sack pressure numbers, pressures evaluated based on the offensive line allowing them, they did it. They solved that problem. Can the Carolina Panthers do for the defensive line what they were able to do for the offensive line in 2024 in free agency? Is the talent there that allows them to do that at the price point that they need to pay, Greg?
It's very difficult to improve a position group that much in one offseason, but yeah, I'm totally with you that when I wrote down their needs, like they certainly could use another receiver. They have a hole at center. Their center, Austin Corbett's a free agent. But you can just write defense. Like
across the board.
Like there is no position on defense where you don't need to get younger and more talented. You have J.C. Horn at cornerback. He's someone you could look to extend this offseason. But other than that, you really don't have guys you're building around other than Derek Brown, who's coming off of a major injury. He's their great interior defensive lineman. And you had some veterans that worked out that are still under contract. A'Shawn Robinson, Jadeveon Clowney. Actually, those are good pieces to have, but you need to start drafting and hitting on some guys that can play alongside them for 1 year and then take over for them in 2026, 27, because they really don't have anyone on the defensive side of the ball practically that they feel like they can build around because they've spent the last year or two really focusing on offense.
And that's what I like about retaining and maintaining the coaching staff and the continuity there with Ejiro Evero, because clearly there was a talent deficiency on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think that you're able to do, because this was a historically bad run defense. Like almost all the way through the season, Dallas late ultimately got better, and so Carolina leapfrogged them back. They were 1-2 right in the NGS era in terms of allowing opponents to run the ball at a very successful rate. And so I like that they keep that consistency there to try to evaluate the talent that they have. You got, I believe, one more year with J.D. Clowney.
Yeah, you're actually paying those guys like a decent amount of money. A'Shawn Robinson, Shai Tuttle, and Jadeveon Clowney all have cap hits over $5 million. I'm like, Shai Tuttle making that much.
Shout out to Shy.
He could be a cut potentially. Potentially not though. At least you have like some guys that are okay. But let's do a little bit of an overlook. I've been doing this with every team.
Okay.
So they have $17 million in cap space. So that's middle of the pack. You'll probably want to open up some more space. You could do that with some restructures. Maybe a Taylor Moton, their right tackle, who's good, could get restructured. You could sign J.C. Horn long term and get that number down.
Space it out.
There's not too much there. They have the number 8 overall pick. And then I kind of forgot about this. They have an extra second round pick that they got for Braden Fisk. It's not an extra because their second is still going to Chicago. They're still paying that freight. This is the last of it. So they're missing their second round pick, but they did do a nice job picking up an extra second to move down in what was a trade for Braden Fisk with the Rams. And they actually have 2 fourths and 2 fifths. So they are a team that, like, if they're at number 8 and they just happen to be in a spot where you could pick up an extra fourth by moving down a few spots, like they just seem like they need to shoot as many arrows as they possibly can in the draft and really replenish young talent, because it's not like this is one of the most talented teams in the league, but they really don't have any young talent. Like their good players are Derek Brown, who's getting up there, and then some veteran free agents that have been around. They have 2 key free agents, and I'll shut up now. In Mike Jackson, who played a lot for them, played pretty well at cornerback, and Xavier Woods. Those were their 2 highest snap totals actually on defense, and they're both free agents. But I guess it's a positive. They only have 1 player in my top 101. And that is Mike Jackson.
Mike Jackson got in your top 101.
Yeah, that was one where I asked some people around the league, and they were like, Mike Jackson had a good year. He was like a starting cornerback, and he's going to do okay in free agency. I was like, okay. He was not on my list, but he snuck in to like the 60 to 80, 60 to 90 range. Yeah. Maybe I'll be wrong, and I'm wrong to trust these people, but they're like, he was like a legit average starting cornerback in the NFL, and he's going to get a decent contract in this cycle. We'll see.
Good. I mean, just watching a lot of Carolina Panthers chasing guys all year probably skewed my perception of the talent.
Maybe I'm wrong
on the defense. We'll find out. I hope Mike Jackson is compensated and well, as I do for everyone. But clearly, whether it was scheme, plan, or they just caught teams on bad weeks, it was rough over on the defensive side of the ball, to the extent that I don't think. And also, how wild is it that we haven't even talked Bryce like 6 minutes into this discussion? If you go take the time machine back to week 3 of last year, and then we tell people, yeah, they re-signed Andy Dalton. People might be thinking, oh, okay, so that's over. Like Bryce was not even. It was over and done, and now we're worried about the defense because the offense showed so much promise towards the end of the year. Right?
It's true. I mean, they have to do everything they can to support him. Like Ikwanu, improved as a left tackle.
Very much.
Still questions about him long term, so it's going to be a big 4th year for him. Jalen Coker was an undrafted free agent who outplayed their first round pick, probably Xavier Legette, who had moments, but certainly outplayed a couple of their high picks in recent years that aren't even on the team anymore. Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall, and so they feel like they have one in Coker. They still need more weapons. They might have a good 4th round tight end in Jatavian Sanders. So they are still in like bring more talent aboard here, and they don't have all the time in the world. They have to consider who their ultimate boss is. Ownership hasn't always been that patient in Carolina. So you want to keep that thing moving forward. You can't back up here to 4 wins in 2025 and expect to like keep this plan going.
And that's what you have to hope that the staff is able to do, because if you are trading down from 8, if you do get more arrows in the quiver, you got to hit. Right, like that's
right. That's what I mean, though. They have 2 fourths, 2 fifths. Can you get an extra third? Like, you just gotta keep. You just hope that you hit on, like, let's say you somehow have like 6 picks in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round.
Okay.
If you can get like 2 starters from those 6 picks, that's amazing. That's all I mean. Is you take a lot of shots. They don't, and one is like a really plus starter. Yeah, that's all I mean. You gotta hit some of your picks.
Yeah, you fill the roster with a guy, and you get one guy that maybe makes it to a second contract, and that's what you have to do. No, of course,
I know,
ceiling,
because
the ceiling is.
You want to know why there's no good young players on this team? They haven't had any picks. Like maybe your Xavier Leggett becomes a good pick, and they had some picks last year again, but like they missed a couple years of picks because of Bryce. It's not Bryce Young's fault, but that's just the reality of how this roster is built right now.
Can I read you 4
Please.
Panthers?
Please.
And you tell me which one that I'm making up.
Mm-hmm.
Shamar Bartholomew.
That one's made up. It's got to be.
Popo Amuave.
Also made up.
Thomas Incoom.
I mean, these are end of the roster guys, but they all are people I'm familiar with. I have to admit.
Okay.
Those are
all 3. Those are all 3 real. Those are all 3 real.
Not a team who, the backups are really impressing you. So this team needs a lot of work. Couple easy moves I think that they can make. Miles Sanders, it didn't work out for them. They can save $5 million against the cap by cutting Miles Sanders. I would expect that to happen. They are all set at running back if Jonathan Brooks can get healthy as kind of the 1B behind Chuba Hubbard, who's now really established himself. He got a nice contract actually during last season. So those are the types of moves I like. Like just take easy wins. You love Chuba Hubbard for a couple more years. Like, okay, now we don't have to worry about running back. It's not going to cost that much. They did that. And I've seen it thrown out there as like, well, should they keep Adam Thielen or not? I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yes.
Adam Thielen's on. He's sneaky on one of the best contracts in the year. I was like, he deserves a raise. How is he only making $4 million next year? He's got like a 1.5 bonus. His cap number's $8 million.
It's like $8 million. Yeah.
He's actually underpaid. Adam Thielen, when he's been out there, has been freaking awesome and is very trustworthy. So I like this offense. You add one more piece to it, but yeah, a lot of work to do on defense. Think they'll be aggressive there. All right, we will take a quick break. I want to hear that break music. And we are going to come back and we are going to do a little news before diving into the Falcons and the Saints, who are a little messier, I feel like. It's a little messy.
They're in this together.
Oh. Now you're just making me feel awkward.
Shout out to the artist. Who is this? What number is this in the library?
Back on NFL Daily, your number one source for off-season Jaden Cromartie and Thomas Incoon news. Shout out to them.
Yeah.
Make it happen on the Carolina Panthers.
Thomas Incoom, the season finale, had a couple tackles.
Nice job.
Both of them solo.
Nice job. Cromartie's going to make it happen, a nose tackle, 6th-round pick. We're going to do a little bit of news till we get back to the NFC South offseason previews. And yes, we already mentioned Chris Godwin. I really think that deal is going to happen. But the NFL dropped some news. This was actually Wednesday morning that the Chargers are going to be the team that kicks off the season, at least in terms of the opening weekend. You have the kickoff game, which will include the Eagles. We don't know who they will be playing against. And then Friday night, we're making this an annual thing now.
Let's do it.
The Brazil-Sao Paulo game. Last year, it was Eagles-Packers, a game that was replayed in the playoffs. And the Eagles started in Brazil, ended with the Super Bowl. Can the Los Angeles Chargers do the same thing? Because the Los Angeles Chargers are starting their season down in Brazil.
Yes, that's why we play the games, Greg.
Yeah.
They got an opportunity. They got a good quarterback. Harbaugh is there in second year. You know, sometimes the second year allows you to build on what was left and fully realize what you've brought as well. Why not? The Chargers in the Super Bowl.
And I'm guessing, based on how they did it last year, they'll go big with this matchup. They'll give them a good opponent. It's not going to be the Titans. No offense to the Titans. Wow. You know what I mean? Like they did it with the Packers, Eagles. They're putting the Chargers there. Chargers are giving up a home game here to go down to Sao Paulo. So that, I don't know if that's going to be every single season. The NFL hasn't committed, but now that we've done a back-to-back season, the precedence is there that we might be going international on that Friday night. And this news being announced kind of reminded me, we hadn't hit really all these international announcements as they've been happening. And I almost felt like my friend Henry Hodgson just tapping my shoulder and asking me, let's give some pop. We're having our first NFL game in Dublin, and you guys didn't even mention it. So that was announced. That's happening. We don't know when, but we do know it's the Steelers that are playing in Dublin. The Colts are going back to Germany. I think they want to make up for that Colts Patriots game.
Yeah, we're sorry.
Yeah, that was a little rough. And they're going to Berlin this time. That's a first, which is really cool. If Henry is listening, I mean, can I get to one of these games? I would love Berlin. My dad was born there. There's a connection there. But I would take Dublin or Sao Paulo. Any of the above would be incredible.
Hank, what we're saying is today is Gregg's birthday.
Yeah, there you go.
Send Gregg to Berlin.
Okay.
Although I'll say that.
Dublin would be cool too. Actually, Sao Paulo would be cool. You go down there for the Friday night game, and then you fly back on Saturday, and you do week one. I'm into it. I'm into all of it. The Colts are in Berlin. The Dolphins are the first team announced in the Madrid game. They're the home, the quote unquote home team in the Madrid game. And then our London teams this year are the Jets, the Browns, both playing at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and the Jaguars in Wembley. So I'm counting it up here. That is 7 international games. We are cranking this number up, and it also has already been announced that the Rams are going all the way to Australia in 2026. So we hadn't hit like these assignments, the Australia news. The NFL is now allowed to go all the way up to 8 under the current rules, and I think that number, that's the minimum that it's going to be at a certain point. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're doing 7. That's a record high. Whether this becomes like a television package that maybe is sold separately. Now, right now, NFL Network, thankfully, gets a lot of these games. That Friday night game is Peacock, ESPN Plus. There's different networks involved in the different games, and NFL Network has a lot of them. But you do wonder at some point they might take all these games, kind of combine it together and make it like a separate package. Maybe that could be Netflix. It could be anyone. People love the NFL, Patrick.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that you can slice it as we get to 7, maybe 8. You could have 2 sets of 4. Maybe, you could have one game on one particular platform, one half of one game. And
don't take away all our games.
No, but
I want some.
Yeah, we like our games here. I like waking up, rise shining, and watching with all of you, and then having you watch some highlights for 3.5 hours afterwards.
I do like that the Steelers are the Dublin team. They claimed their territory. The Rooneys, he was the ambassador for President Obama. Mr. Rooney back in the day, and that'll be an amazing atmosphere. Man, that would be a great one to be at. Which one, if you had to choose?
Oh, I would absolutely go to Ireland. I mean, that
would be your first pick.
That would be my number 1 pick. In terms of I guess Madrid.
I know. I think I'd have to go Sao Paulo or Madrid just because of the actual locales. That would be cool.
But yeah, if I'm going anywhere in Europe, it's going to be to see the folks in Ireland.
Okay. Good choice. That was our international news portion of the program. We've got offensive coordinator news, and they're kind of related. We're going to get into the Saints in a second, but we've learned that the Saints have decided on Doug Nussmeier as their offensive coordinator. I thought of him as Kellen Moore's buddy, essentially, that has traveled with him from Dallas to Los Angeles to Philadelphia. Wait, was he in Dallas? He definitely was in Los Angeles. He's definitely in Philadelphia, and now he is in New Orleans. But you know him as the coach of the Crimson Tide in Alabama.
Yeah, from 2012 to 2013, he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And then before making his way to the Cowboys, where there was that carryover with Kellen Moore during his transition from quarterback who's probably coaching to just taking his helmet away.
He broke his ankle that year. He was supposed to be the backup to Tony Romo, and it ended up being Dak Prescott's rookie of the year season.
Yeah, so that solved those particular problems. But they were able to have a little success. Ultimately came to an end. He went to Michigan after that. But Doug Nussmeier back in the OC game. Good to see.
Yeah, this is Kellen Moore's offense. Ultimately, I think if you're an Eagles fan, you're almost happy that he's taking a guy that's kind of his guy and isn't necessarily blowing up the rest of the staff. he had a big role, I think, in installing that offense. And the reporting from Philadelphia, I listened to the podcast All PHLY, and they said it really was a melding. Clearly, Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts and a lot of things that they did before were a big part of their offense. You could almost see it in the week that Kellen Moore didn't have Jalen Hurts and maybe Nick Sirianni doing so much, which was week 18. And then suddenly it looked like a Kellen Moore offense. And so they go to New Orleans and they are running that offense. We still don't know who their DC is going to be, but the rumors since the beginning have been Brandon Staley. And
he's back.
He still appears to be the favorite. Jordan Rodriguez loves her some Christian Parker, who is a DB's coach with the Eagles, and he apparently is a finalist for the Saints job. So they could be hurting the Eagles staff if they decide to go Christian Parker and not Brandon Staley. That would maybe feel more like new blood in terms of that type of decision. Can you name the Eagles' new offensive coordinator? And were you familiar with him before this week?
Before today, no, I was not.
Kevin Patullo is his name, and he's kind of Nick Sirianni's guy. He is to Nick Sirianni what Doug Nussmeier is to Kellen Moore. He came with Nick from Indianapolis to Philadelphia, has always kind of been his right-hand man, the guy kind of helping to implement what Nick wants to do. And probably if you're in the building, a guy that you kind of know is Nick's guy for what that's worth. Like if you're going to be talking trash about the boss, maybe don't do it in front of Kevin because that's Nick's boy. Like that just wouldn't be smart to do. So maybe that's a little bit of a takeaway for me. It's an inexperienced play caller, guy who's never really called plays. And it's a sign that maybe Nick has a little more juice than last offseason when he didn't get to pick his offensive coordinator.
And that's what winning a Super Bowl does. He goes from this perception of, hey, what would you say you do here to the most, I guess, like neutered coach in the entire NFL to now, we got his guy calling plays. He gets to be Jalen Hurts' sixth offensive play caller.
Crazy.
Where I guess he has experience in the turnover there. I don't know that it's something you feel positive about, but if any quarterback can do it, I guess it will be Jalen.
Well, and it seems like Jalen Hurts has a big voice in this offense because it always kind of looks the same. And that's okay. Like you should be playing to the strengths of your quarterback. But like I said, Patullo has been there all the way since 2021. He's not that young. I think he's in his young 40s, which for today's coaches like if they're not like in their late 20s or 30s, they seem old. So he has been around. And I did think it was interesting. Ian Rappaport says that Parks Frazier, who kind of is a rising offensive assistant with the Dolphins and is known pretty well, is actually going to replace Patullo as the pass game coordinator. There was some speculation that maybe Frank Reich would come back in as like a quarterback's coach or pass game coordinator. I suppose that's still possible. But no, it's going to be this guy Parks Frazier. And so overall, it's continuity, which is for the most part what you would want if you're an Eagles fan.
And I feel like maybe if things had gone wrong towards the end of the season, maybe that would be a Frank Reich situation. And people would be, there would be all eyes on Frank Reich if there's a 2-2 start again and Nick's having fun with folks in the crowd. But now, you win Super Bowls and those issues don't exist.
And to be fair, like they made a great decision to keep Nick Sirianni.
They did.
Like they made a great decision to hire Vic Fangio more than anything. I think something they wanted to do for a couple of years, and I don't think that had anything to do really with Sirianni. But they made a great decision. So good luck to Doug Nussmeier, Kevin Patullo. I had some news that the projected salary cap is coming in at $277.5 to $281.5 million. For some context, that is more than was expected, like even higher than the high end of what was expected. People thought it'd be 265 to 275, so it could be well over that. At a minimum, it is a $22 million increase from last year. That is a lot. It has really gone up the last couple of years for a few reasons. They were artificially kind of keeping it down, waiting for this TV deal to happen. It's now happening, and it's now exponentially increasing. And it just goes to the overall trend that I've been pointing out is like, there's a lot of cap space. Like 15 teams have more than enough where cap space is sort of not an issue in a way that is so different than the NBA, for instance.
Yeah, it's $100 million more than it was in 2018.
That's crazy.
Like,
that's good.
2018, not that long ago, I guess, for those of us who remember it vividly. But yeah, it's a lot of money. Shout out to collective bargaining.
Right. It has nothing to do with them being generous.
Yeah,
it's just
organize your workplace, everybody.
Yeah, it's just a percentage of the revenues that are coming in. That has basically stayed the same. The players have gotten no advantages there, but the revenues coming in are just going way up, and it's going to make it easier. These teams that are spending all the way to the cap, but doing it kind of in a responsible, forward-looking way. I would put the Eagles in that category, for instance. Like, they're always spending to the cap. Those are the teams that are doing better. These teams that are carrying over too much money, it doesn't make sense. Like, the Patriots have volleyed between having terrible cap situations to now they have $100+ million. Like, there's not enough good players out there to spend on all that. And that actually adds some context to our final news item. I just thought it was interesting, Patrick, Micah Parsons speaking about how he thinks he fits in the Cowboys' new scheme, and Matt Eberflus talking very confidently about how he wants to play to Micah Parsons' strengths. I've been banging this drum about maybe Micah Parsons gets traded. You know, our insiders have said they've thought about it. The way Parsons is talking, the way the Cowboys coaches are talking, maybe this is a little bit of a charade. It doesn't really make any sense for them to trade him. And so I'm just kind of putting it out there that, like, they're not acting like that this is something that's going to be ending in the next couple of weeks. Just throwing that out there.
Of all of the, because we think about this pantheon of Dallas Cowboys players that have been within the Cowboys ecosystem and played at a very high level and deserve large contracts, I can't think of a more Jerry Jones player than Micah Parsons.
True.
I can't, like a player with his own podcast who is in the content creation game as Jerry Jones is, who is more than adept at generating attention on and off the field. That this is going to be a thing that happens for years to come. But as long as those two are involved together, I think he's going to be a Dallas.
Yeah, he did say it will be challenging having a new coordinator, but overall, if you read all the comments that Parsons said on his podcast, I really think this is a matter of time. Although Parsons did note when the salary cap went up, you know, I think he did like the eyes emoji, just like, oh, this is good news. So I don't think we're going to see Micah Parsons in a Cowboys uniform again until a contract is signed. That's not much of a hot take. I don't think, like, he's not going to be at OTAs or mini camp or training camp if the Cowboys waste, you know, his time like they did with us last year in CeeDee Lamb.
I mean, he may wear his jersey on the podcast. And during training camp, we're going to have clips on NFL Network of what Micah's saying on his podcast. And then we're going to go to Jerry in the Tower, right, in Oxnard. And it's ultimately going to come down to the very final moment until Micah Parsons is the highest paid non-quarterback in football.
Okay, I agree. So I'm taking him off the trade block right now until I've proven otherwise. Shout out to his brother Terrence, though. In a series of tweets, he noted that the two sides are very far apart in their contract negotiations, but helpfully suggested some ways that actually they could, like, free up some money, like restructuring Dak and CD and stuff like that. Not that that's a big secret.
But they don't. But why would they need to do that?
Well, normally it would be what you would want to do, but they just signed those deals. It's tough to restructure, like, right off the top. Like, well, no, they would do it because you just, in their mind, they're not giving up any money. When players restructure, when Joe Burrow is like, hey, I'll restructure, it's like, yeah, bro, you're just getting like a huge signing bonus instead of it paid out slowly. You're not doing anyone any favors.
But what I'm saying is, whatever the number the Dallas Cowboys are willing to pay Micah Parsons, like, that's the discussion. Like, this idea that, like, oh, well, we can't do that because, you know, we got, you know, the backloader over on behind the team unit. It's like, no, the money's there. What's the number? Like, that's what the far part is. Like, just find the number.
Right. They are the opposite of the next team we're going to talk about. Let's put the New Orleans Saints on the clock.
Oh, boy.
Because love them or hate them, the Saints do find a way to drop, wring every last drop out of that salary cap. And they are $54 million over the cap as we enter February, and we know they're gonna figure it all out. But Patrick, I'm wondering how that informs your big question about the New Orleans Saints.
My big question that I'm so glad that I can ask it to Gregg Rosenthal, who is a valued resource on today, his birthday, because I've had a lot of fun with the fact that Dennis Allen was coaching this football team over the past few years.
Yeah.
He is no longer the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Did the majority of the problems that the Saints had in 2024, were they solved by having Dennis Allen no longer be a part of the football team?
No,
I
don't think so.
Okay.
And
I got to check it back.
As much as
because it directly influenced the construction of the roster. The Philadelphia Eagles notably had two players celebrate with the Lombardi Trophy who were New Orleans Saints and were no longer on the Saints strictly because of Dennis Allen.
You make a good point. Zach Bond, they didn't even know how to use him, turned one of the best players in the league, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson just couldn't manage him because you weren't a grown-up enough to do so.
And that was prime CJGJ.
That's
right?
fair. That's fair.
And so there was a evacuation of talent.
That's right? The hope. I guess that's the hope. That's the
being
hope.
there. And so I would suggest, and this is my very biased opinion, despite what the number is, I understand negative $51 million looks like a lot, right? The cap goes up, so that changes. That changes and helps a little bit. And also, you can move things around. You don't have to try to lose. Like the idea that you need to go into things and say, oh yeah, we gotta rebuild. We can't pay anybody. We can't do that. That's not a necessary function. And I know you're skeptical of Mickey piloting this process.
Yes.
But there is a path to do it that makes sense, that still gives us something to watch, because that's what I care about.
I agree, and they certainly will agree with that. My thing is just looking at this team, it's just, what is this team? It doesn't, I don't know what it is. They've changed their plan, like in terms of what type of skill set they're looking for on the offensive line a bunch of times. They have Olave and Shaheed, two guys who could, if you were a more forward-thinking organization, and this is where they run into problems, they would be working out contract extensions for Olave or Shaheed this offseason. Is that going to be a priority for them? Hopefully it will be. Maybe they'll turn a new leaf, but it seems like they're always trying to figure out, okay, how many of these old guys still make sense? Let's go through the list. Okay. Here are some players still on this roster. Cameron Jordan, big salary cap number. Demario Davis, pretty big salary cap number. Taysom Hill, pretty big salary cap number. Ryan Ramczyk is, by the way, still on this roster, although he's going to retire. They've been keeping him. That is just a numbers thing. Tyrann Mathieu, does he make sense still on this roster? And then most importantly, Derek Carr, who, if you cut him with a post-June 1st cut, but then you don't get the savings till after June, it's a $30 million savings. If you find someone willing to trade for Derek Carr, you save $11 million. More importantly, you don't commit more guaranteed money to him in 2026, and you don't pay him like $40 million this year, which I just don't want. I don't want to pay Derek Carr $40 million in any scenario. So unless Derek Carr is willing to take a big pay cut, I don't even want to start that negotiation. I'm just trying to get rid of him. That's to me question number one. And all the reporting and the whispers from our friends like Adam and Ryan on the Saints Block Party podcast is that Mickey is a Derek Carr guy. He is the Derek Carr guy, and Mickey being there maybe complicates this.
But Mickey was also he was also the Dennis Allen guy.
Yeah, and ownership came over the top on that. Will they do it here? I thought they would get rid of Mickey, but they didn't.
He was vocal about it after the fact. And so if they can shift that change in that capacity, because Derek Carr right now has 18.71% of the cap, right, devoted to Derek Carr. And I know Cam Jordan and Taysom Hill are expensive, but that part is glaring. I don't think that you can have Taysom Hill back, right, at that particular pay rate, and things become a little easier. Alvin Kamara is not an issue. I think Alvin Kamara is Mr.
No, they just gave him a nice big contract.
So
They got a bunch of bad publicity for a couple weeks. I don't know if you remember that. And then they gave Alvin Kamara a ton of new money. So that was actually a positive thing that Mickey Loomis did just to get everyone off his back.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. Do more positive things, like getting perhaps, unpopular players in different spots in the league.
It's not about like ripping the Band-Aid off and looking to the future. It's just Kim Jordan is an all-time great player. DeMario Davis is too with the Saints. Honey Badger has had a great career, but they're just declining players. And where are the young, good players on this team that you're building around? You need to start finding more of those. And they have the number 9 overall pick, highest.
What are we? 9. Excuse me. It was 10 before.
That was Mickey Loomis not remembering what pick he had back in when he did his press conference. They do have an extra 3rd and 4th round pick because of the Marshawn Lattimore trade. So that was a nice move. Those are the types. They remind me of the Panthers in that way. It was like they need more 3rds, they need more 4ths. They just need to like fill out this roster with some young guys, because you can say like they always figure it out. It's fine. The cap isn't that real. But like they can't even cut most of these guys and get any savings because they've already gone to the bank and restructured them so many times that actually cutting them doesn't really save them unless you do a post-June 1st cut, and then it doesn't save it till June. And it's just like at some point, I do think you have to make tough decisions with these guys that are declining. There's a few of them on the roster.
Obviously, a trade for Carr would be the valued option.
Right. Could you get like a 6th to 7th swap? He's not going to get much for him. But yeah,
I mean, somebody's going to need a quarterback at this juncture. I think you can convince some of these teams, perhaps one of the teams in New York.
But would anyone trade for him though with that contract? I think he defines to me the type of guy you're like, let's just wait till I get cut. Like I'm not giving up, because then you have to deal with that contract. Okay, then you have to negotiate him to take a pay cut. It's just complicated. I don't think anyone wants to pay Derek Carr $30+ million.
Okay, so if you're playing that game of chicken, do you just start Derek Carr as your quarterback?
If you're the Saints?
No.
Because I wouldn't, because like I said, it guarantees money into next year, and you're actually paying him that money this year, even if it's not a ton of cap savings. I just don't want to be paying him $30 million. Let's start spending that money. Like, if you're going to be spending that cash, spend it on the Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed extensions. Do it on stuff like that. Let's move forward. You want to know some top free agents from this team?
Yeah.
Paulson Adebo, who was potentially going to get a big could have gotten a big contract from the Saints after his 3rd season. Unfortunately, in his 4th season, started out very slowly, was having a rough first month of the season, and then he suffered a serious injury. I still have him relatively high because he's a young player who's shown a high level of production, so I think some team will take a shot. Maybe Dennis Allen in Chicago. Wouldn't surprise me. And then Chase Young is a free agent who came in and kind of did what you expected.
Solid year.
Yeah, it was solid. He's a top 50 free agent. I think we're stopping waiting for Chase Young to be any different than he is, but can he be like late career Jadeveon Clowney? Maybe. Not quite, but
yeah. That would be the absolute ceiling, right? Like 2024 Jadeveon Clowney.
That's fine. He's going to have a good career. He was the number 2 overall pick, but he had some serious injuries. What do you think this team's biggest need is? If you look up and down the roster, what is something they just lack that screams
depth, right? Because you talked about the age of some of the guys that were on their way out. Ramczyk occupying the space, even right with in retirement. With that,
Trevor Penning revived Trevor Penning.
Yeah,
supposedly.
But that's really what. They just need talent. I think back to that Trevor Penning draft where it's very, very difficult to draft the player that you need at the position that you need that is the best player for you to take at that point. Like to kind of thread that needle is very difficult.
And give up extra picks to do so.
So just stop drafting for need. Find unique talents that you can get on your team, because you're able to find them. Like Rashid Shaheed, everybody missed on Rashid Shaheed, and he found his way to New Orleans. And so you just try to locate that unique talent, but the team fell apart.
I just don't know. I don't know what this team is. I think they need everything except for running back. They're good at running back. Linebacker, I guess they feel good enough about Pete Werner, Demario Davis. Left tackle, they found one. And then they definitely need some pass rushing.
Juwan Johnson's going to be a free agent.
Good point. Forgot about Juwan Johnson.
He's a tight end as well.
Probably the top tight end available. It's either him or Gesicki or Tyler Conklin. Not a lot of good.
League wide?
Yeah,
Juwan
not a lot
Johnson
of good.
won?
Yeah, not a lot of good free agent tight ends. It's Juwan Johnson, Tyler Conklin, and Gesicki are both between like 60 and 100 on my top 101. All right, we're going to wrap up the NFC South with the Falcons here. And my question with the Falcons, basically, can they fix this defense in one offseason? Because I just don't think they're going to be patient. Raheem Morris is a defensive coach, and the defense needs a lot of work. They are just not going to, I think, have the resources. They don't have a lot of picks to change the offense much. The offense looks pretty good on paper overall. But can they fix this defense in one offseason? And it's going to have to mostly be through free agency and trades. Because they don't have a ton of draft capital. I mean, it would be through the draft too, but less than other teams.
Yeah, it's context dependent. Can they fix the defense? Can they compete with the defense as it's projected to be structured in 2025? Yes. I think they can be a competitive football team.
I disagree. They need to add a lot right now.
To the extent that they were in 2024, Greg?
Well, they're missing they're also losing a couple players. Justin Simmons is a free agent.
Yeah, they brought in Simmons for a year.
I think they're going to have to cut either Onyemata or Grady Jarrett just for cap reasons. That would be painful. Matthew Judon is a free agent. Mike Hughes played a lot for them. He's a free agent. So I don't know. It's just a rough looking defense on paper.
Yes, it's rough, but I think projecting right this next year of Bijan. With Michael Penix Jr. with an entire offseason going in as the starter, I think the offense is in a position where they don't necessarily need a top 10 defense to be competitive. I think Raheem and his group can get this defense in the 17, 18s, 19s.
Okay,
and
that
be
would
a
be
functional good. NFL team. I don't think it's as bad. Like I don't think their 2024 Carolina Panthers bad, right?
Just personnel wise, like they have Raheem Morris, who's done a good job coaching up lesser talented teams. But just talent wise, if you took the coaching out of it, they're pretty bottom of the barrel. And in the end, they finished 29th in DVOA last year. Overall, they were a bad defense. Like if they had a that 17th ranked defense that you were talking about, like they would have probably won the NFC South. It would have been something.
I mean, they came close doing it.
Right. They almost did it anyways. Here's just a little big picture look. They are missing their third round pick because of what turned out to be a disastrous Matthew Judon trade. I don't know if Judon gets a job this year. He might be out of the league. They lost a 5th round pick for tampering with Kirk Cousins. That was pretty disastrous all the way around.
Yeah.
They lost a 6th round pick for Van Jefferson, which, whatever. And I mean, I'm not going to kill him for it, but it wasn't a good move overall. He hasn't helped them. And then they have $11.9 million in cap space right now, middle lower of the pack. They are spending $170+ million on their offense and barely over 100 on their defense, and that is largely because of Kirk Cousins. And to me, that's a big decision or a big thing they got to make happen, because I think they've already made their decision. Can they get someone to trade for Kirk Cousins, and how much will that save them against the cap? On paper, it would save $7 million against the cap, so that's something. But they would still have $37 million in dead cap money for Kirk Cousins. Just a couple years after they had about 50+ for Matt Ryan, having 37+ for Kirk Cousins is bad management. It's like making the same sort of mistake twice in a short period. It just didn't work out.
No, you have to take those swings, though, right? The Achilles tear, of course, is going to be preeminent in all of this. But the Falcons weren't the only team to make offerings to Kirk Cousins, and we gotta get rid of this whole tampering idea. The whole thing is so nebulous. I can't believe we've seen teams do far worse things.
Yeah,
and not face.
The only problem was that he talked about it on the podium, and then Florio wrote an article about it. Honestly, if Florio didn't write an article about it, I don't know if they even get that pick. Take it away.
Now I hate it even more, Greg.
I'm just guessing. I actually don't even know that was how it all happened, but I just feel like he talked about it on the podium, and then Florio's like, "Isn't that tampering?" And they're like, "Well, I guess we got to take away a fifth-round pick."
It's like, we have to have this rule in place to justify agents taking what they take, because they have to be the ones to have these conversations. And if players are trying to represent themselves, and they're in a fundamental disadvantage because they can't have these things. So why else does the rule exist? Anyway,
tampering is a big problem in this society. Who's going to tamper with Drew Dahlman? So let's look at some big questions for this team, the big free agents. I mentioned, not a ton on defense. Justin Simmons, Mike Hughes, two guys who helped them out. I would think you would want to bring back Justin Simmons at the right price. He was good for them overall. Drew Dahlman is a guy that not a lot of our listeners might be familiar with. He was a 4th-round pick in 2021. Since he took over the starting job in his second season, he's played almost every game, missed some time in 2024, but he started every game that he was available. Is thought of as one of the better run blocking guards in the league. He's kind of the prototypical smaller move guy that you want in a zone scheme. Maybe not as good, stopping pass rushers, which usually is the thing that you want. But if you're surrounded by a couple big guards, I could see that being a very attractive package that multiple teams could be looking for this offseason. Maybe the Packers, I'll throw out one. The Seahawks might be another. They have Clint Kubiak. It's a similar system. Drew Dahlman, talking to people around the league, he is going to get a starting offensive lineman type of who got $20 million a year, but Drew Dahlman will be that guy. He is absolutely getting that. I don't think the Falcons are going to be able to afford to keep him.
And that's another problem with making the not necessarily bad investments. I mean, Kirk Cousins being one of the worst, right, that you can make. But I see a case, right, for being in positions that they are with Onyemata and Grady Jarrett's contracts, where things didn't necessarily go the way that you would have wanted them to go in 2024. But you have to give up on guys in that range, between 25 and 28, who are playing good football that other teams would like to have. If things are operated on a good level money wise, you shouldn't have to see those players go be successful elsewhere.
Well, that's true. And I saw Grady Jarrett pop up on our NFL.com cut candidates list, and I was really surprised because when you think Falcons, you think Grady Jarrett. And considering he was coming back from a big-time injury, I thought he made some plays, and maybe wasn't the old Grady Jarrett, but they would save $16 million in cap savings pre-June 1st by cutting him. And so that will be a consideration. Onyemata, I thought he's been a classic one good year, one disastrous year type of career, and they could save about $8 million for cutting him. So they might, don't cut Grady Jarrett.
No.
People have Grady Jarrett jerseys probably.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
And that's why, the Cousins miss hurts so bad, where you got somebody who's associated with the team for an off season and then a few weeks of the season, and then it's just over, and you're having to say goodbye to a franchise cornerstone.
And when I look at the needs around the team, we basically have pointed it out. There's not a position that they don't need on defense. Maybe off-ball linebacker they're happy with. Caden Ellis was awesome, and then Troy Anderson was not awesome as their second guy, but he's a young player at least. But man, for the millionth straight year, ever since John Abraham was there, the Falcons need an edge player. So in this draft and in free agency, they need an edge player. And then I just looked at some contracts they could get done. Drake London, is eligible for a contract extension. We've been talking about getting contracts done early. That needs to be a guy who's part of your future. And if Kyle Pitts is not part of your future, he's not a crazy guy to think about in terms of a trade. If you could get a decent pick I don't think that's crazy. If you kind of are making the decision he's not for us in 2026, could I get a defensive player for Kyle Pitts, restart the clock, or like a veteran defense player? I don't think that's crazy.
Or you write a number down and slide it across the table and see if Kyle will sign it. Right? Is that insane?
No.
At this point?
No. It's got to be. It's not top 5 tight end money though. I'm just not convinced in him as a player. Too up and down. And D. Alford's another guy who's been pretty good for them that they could probably get to sign long term. That is your Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints messy recap. They hate each other, Patrick, and they're similarly messy. You thought I was kind of putting the NFC South in a spot that I shouldn't.
No, well, in hindsight and looking back at it, I know you love this division.
I do.
I know, and you want better. Specifically for the Falcons and the Saints.
I do.
You want it to mean something again.
I do. But as I don't remember if it was Big Boy who said it. The South got something to say. Like we got to get going this NFC South. But yes, I made a choice. It was strategic, and we're putting our NFC North
let's go
offseason preview up on Friday. And you want to know why that is? Play the music.
Why is that?
Well, because the Friday one, it sits there longer. Saturday, Sunday, sometimes it's a Monday morning.
This
end, which has more like primetime players, good teams fighting for. I think it's the NFC North. I think that's more of a Friday show.
Okay, we'll do it.
Hey, look, when we're quoting Big Boy here, it's regular season.
We're all disgusting sickos. Football oozing our pores. Old pizza and just what can I eat? Just mawing on some Ritz crackers with some cheese just so we can have some more football.